Jonathan Paul Luna was a 38-year-old assistant U.S. attorney in Baltimore, Maryland with a bright future ahead of him, but on December 4, 2003 his body was found face down in a creek in rural Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, around 70 miles from where he was last seen at the Baltimore courthouse. His death was strange and full of mystery. He had been stabbed 36 times with his own pocketknife before drowning in the creek next to his car, which was partly underwater. Luna had worked on dangerous cases, and the events during his last hours were confusing and have left investigators with unanswered questions even after more than 20 years. One major problem in the case is that different law enforcement groups disagreed on how he died. Officials in Pennsylvania said it was murder, but the FBI said it was suicide, even though there was a lot of evidence that pointed more toward murder. This disagreement made many people suspect that something was being hidden from the public. Even now in 2025, news organizations are still going to court to try to get Luna's autopsy report released, as it has never been made public. On the night he died, Luna drove through several states and some parts of his trip were recorded on security cameras, but no one knows why he was traveling or where he was going. People still wonder if his death was connected to his job, something personal, or something else completely. Jonathan Paul Luna was born on October 21, 1965 in the South Bronx, New York City, to a Filipino father, Paul Luna, who worked in restaurants, and an African-American mother, 𝗧𝗂𝗧 Luna, who came from the American South. He grew up in the Patterson housing projects near Yankee Stadium and managed to rise above the challenges of his tough neighborhood. He later went to Fordham University for his undergraduate studies and then to the University of North Carolina School of Law, where he shared a room with Reggie Shuford, who later became a well-known civil rights lawyer. After law school, Luna worked briefly at the law firm Arnold & Porter in Washington, D.C. and then at the Federal Trade Commission. He later became a prosecutor in Brooklyn and eventually joined the U.S. Attorney's Office in Baltimore, Maryland, where he worked on cases involving drugs, fraud, and violent crime. One of his biggest cases involved Dion Lionel Smith, a rapper known as Poppy Jenkins, and Walter O'Reilly Poindexter, who ran a drug trafficking operation pretending to be a music studio called Stash House Records. The two men were accused of selling heroin and using violence to protect their business, and they were facing long prison sentences. In December 2003, Luna was busy finalizing a plea deal for that case, which ended with the two men pleading guilty on December 4. He was known for working hard and often stayed at the courthouse late at night. On the evening of December 3, Luna got a phone call and returned to the courthouse before leaving again at 11:38 p.m. He drove northeast, passing through Delaware using his EZ Pass but then switching to cash tolls when he entered Pennsylvania. Around 12:57 a.m. he withdrew $200 from an ATM near Newark, Delaware. His car was later seen by cameras entering Pennsylvania around 3:20 a.m. And just 2 hours later at 5:30 a.m. his body was found in a creek in Brecknock Township next to his partly submerged car. He had been stabbed many times with his own pocketknife before drowning. As mentioned earlier, Jonathan Luna was found with 36 stab wounds from his own pocketknife, but the official cause of death was ruled as drowning. Most of the stab wounds were not deep and he had no signs of fighting back, which led to different opinions among investigators. While Pennsylvania authorities believed it was murder, the FBI leaned toward the idea of suicide, creating confusion and disagreement. His last journey took him through several states with strange detours, and he withdrew money from his bank account along the way. It's still unclear whether he was traveling by choice or was being forced. In his personal life, Luna had been married since 1993 to Angela Hopkins, an obstetrician, and they had 2 children together. People who worked with him described him as a hardworking and private man, with no clear signs that anything was wrong before his death. His autopsy report is still sealed and there are ongoing legal fights to make it public. So the timeline goes like, on the night of December 3, 2003, at around 11:38 p.m. Jonathan Luna left the U.S. District Courthouse in Baltimore after returning earlier that evening to work on a plea deal in that Stash House case. Surveillance cameras caught his silver Honda Accord leaving the parking garage, but what stood out to investigators was that he left behind his laptop, phone, eyeglasses, and even an unfinished draft of the plea agreement on his desk. He entered Pennsylvania at 2:47 a.m. and by 5:30 a.m. his car was found partly underwater in a creek in Brecknock Township. Just before 1 a.m. he was seen alone on camera. But the quiet location and late hour raised questions about whether someone was nearby, off camera. Some parts of his drive, especially in rural Pennsylvania, weren't covered by surveillance cameras, leaving a 90-minute gap with no information before his body was discovered. Investigators were puzzled by the roundabout route he took. He could have reached the same area in about 90 minutes on a direct road, but instead he drove for about 6 hours, crossing rivers and states with no clear reason. Some believed he might have been trying to shake off someone following him, while others thought he was confused and possibly suicidal. There was no clear proof of someone else being involved, but there were also no signs that he was alone. Toll workers didn't report seeing anyone else in his car or anything strange, yet the stab wounds he had were shallow and not immediately fatal. He died from drowning, which raised even more doubts, as it's difficult to believe he could have done that to himself. He had also recently received threatening letters, though no clear connection was made to his death. There were more unanswered questions. Some DNA in the car wasn't his, and the time between his last toll and when he was found is still a blank space. On December 4, 2003, Jonathan Luna was found in a quiet and remote area of Brecknock Township in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania near 1439 Dry Tavern Road. The location was a rural property owned by Sensenig and Weaver Well Drilling, surrounded by open fields and farmlands with very little traffic in the area. Luna's silver Honda Accord was discovered partly submerged in a shallow creek, its front wheels resting on the bank. The engine was still running but the headlights were off. Inside the vehicle, about $200 in cash was scattered around, and there was blood both inside and outside the car, including smears on the driver's door, stains on the seats, and a significant pool of blood on the floor behind the front seats. A toll ticket also had blood on it, suggesting that Luna may have been in the back seat while someone else drove. His body was found face down in the shallow creek, fully dressed in a suit and overcoat with his court ID still hanging around his neck. He had suffered 36 stab wounds, mostly to his neck and upper chest. Many of the injuries were shallow, often described as hesitation marks, but one deep wound had severed his left carotid artery, causing heavy bleeding. Despite these serious injuries, the official cause of death was ruled as drowning based on the presence of water in his lungs, indicating that he was still alive when he entered the creek. The knife used in the stabbing was Luna's own pocket knife, which was found in the creek near his body. One particularly unusual detail was the absence of major defensive wounds, which led some investigators to believe that Luna may have been restrained, drugged, or unconscious during the attack. Others argued that the shallow wounds could indicate self-infliction. Two local coroners, Dr. Wayne Ross and Dr. Barry Walp, ruled the death a homicide, citing the drowning and multiple stab wounds as clear signs of foul play. However, the FBI suggested the possibility of suicide, pointing to the hesitation marks and lack of defensive injuries as consistent with self-harm. His death has led to many different ideas about what really happened, with some people believing it was murder and others thinking it might have been suicide. Those who think it was homicide point to his job, since Luna was working on big drug and gang cases in Baltimore, including one where $36,000 in evidence went missing, and some believe someone targeted him because of this. The way the blood was found in the back seat and how the car was placed in the creek also suggest that someone else might have been driving, and local officials in Lancaster still say it was murder, with one coroner even refusing to change the cause of death when asked by the FBI. On the other side, those who believe Luna killed himself mention that many of his stab wounds were shallow and look like hesitation marks, which are common in self-harm cases. They also say he had personal issues like hidden credit card debt, a secret online dating profile, and he was about to take a polygraph test related to the missing money, which could have added stress. Still, people argue against the suicide theory by saying that stabbing yourself 36 times is not typical in suicide cases, and it doesn't make sense why he would drive so far into the night, take out cash, and set up something that looked like a kidnapping just to kill himself. Jonathan Luna's mysterious death deeply shook the legal community. A respected federal prosecutor who rose from a tough childhood in the South Bronx, his sudden and unsolved death left friends and colleagues in disbelief and frustration. Tensions grew as the FBI suggested suicide while local Pennsylvania officials insisted it was murder. The conflicting views raised concerns about the safety of prosecutors and stirred anger among Luna's peers like Brooklyn prosecutor Rob Royland. who criticized the investigation. Luna's family rejected the suicide theory, believing media stories about debts and dating were meant to damage his reputation and hide the truth. They continued to seek justice, hiring investigators, and pushing for a formal inquest in 2007. Media coverage of Jonathan Luna's death added confusion and controversy to an already mysterious case. Many outlets focused on his personal life rather than the crime, which his friends called a distraction. The FBI's suicide theory was widely reported despite the local coroner ruling it a homicide. Some reports even suggested mob ties or a government cover-up tied to a missing $36,000 from one of Luna's cases. Documentaries like The Midnight Ride of Jonathan Luna in 2024 argued it was murder and claimed key evidence was ignored. Friends criticized the media for victim blaming and pushing personal issues over serious clues. Efforts to unseal records, including the autopsy, are continued. On the night of December 3, 2003, Jonathan Luna leaves his Baltimore office at 11:38 p.m. and took a bizarre 600-mile journey across 4 states instead of heading home. He paid tolls in cash, possibly to avoid tracking, and withdrew $200 from an ATM alone. He left behind his phone, glasses, laptop, and a key legal document, which was highly unusual. Luna was then found dead the next morning in a Pennsylvania creek, with 36 stab wounds, most shallow, and a fatal neck injury. Yet, the official cause of death was drowning, raising serious doubts. How could a man with such wounds crawl into water to die? Blood in the backseat and unidentified DNA suggest he wasn't alone. The FBI called it suicide, local authorities said murder, but the evidence, missing items, strange travel, and wounds strongly suggests foul play, not suicide. Many believe the truth was buried to protect powerful interests.
My name is 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗲𝗀, and Jonathan Luna and I were first cousins. He was a bright light. He was one of the most special people that I've ever known. I did not see him often, but whenever I did see him, it was always a good reunion. He was very positive, just a dynamic person.